As we move to our second round of questions by our candidates to their opponents, I would just like to remind our voters that Election Day, the municipal election day, is going to be held on Tuesday, May 13th, 2014. I encourage you to come out and vote. We have talked about several issues this evening. If you are a registered voter, you may vote in the upcoming municipal election. If you have any questions, please call my office at 973-321-1310, or if we can be of any assistance to you. There is material, there's election material. If you would like for it to be sent to you, we would be happy to do that. The election offices are all located in the city of Patterson, and we're here to help you, the voter. We now go to our next candidate, who will present her second round of questions to her opponents, and that would be Miss Maria Teresa. Her second round. Her second round of questions.
It's my second round of questions. And last.
I thought it was vice versa.
The closing one.
That's the closing, Councilman. We began that way and then we end this way. Mr. Gal, will you tell me again, why wouldn't you approve the check for $74,000 that Mr. Torres received on his last day of office?
Why wouldn't I approve it?
Yes.
Well, if I was the appropriate authority, number one, he has a salary position. Everybody knows in a salary position you get paid the same pay, whether you work 40 hours a week, 100 hours a week, whether you have vacation pay, holiday pay, or sick pay. You get paid 7 days a week. So where did the original authorization come from? Did the people in the finance department just take it upon themselves and say, well, the mayor's been here for the last 20 so years. He claims he had 25 years of service, which he's changed his story 3-4 times each time he was asked. The housing authority didn't count, and he didn't have 25 years of continued service. So in addition to that, he was never entitled for that compensation. He was running for re-election. How did the finance department know that he wasn't going to be re-elected? And they cut him this check. So what happened? God only knows. How it happened? God only knows. But what I do know is, and it's what everybody is saying, it's a salaried position. Anyone who gets paid a salary gets the same pay, 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. And we know on numerous occasions he was on vacation in the DR, in Italy, I remember, even Puerto Rico. Wasn't he paid during those times? You better believe he was. And the only way we will really get to the bottom and the detail of all this stuff,
That's God punishing him.
yeah, I think that's God punishing you, because we're back on the year, pal. If anything,
Let me just make sure,
Sure.
Mr. Gal,
Oh, you're on.
that the televisions are recording.
Sure.
Ms. Greer, do you know of other televisions? But did it shut down the? Okay, I just want to know if we're live still on.
Still out on the cable system, but the computer that was recording it just took a power hit, so we're still live.
Okay, we're
so
live.
we're still live.
We're live. Mr. Gal, I apologize. I just didn't want you to continue if we weren't being recorded.
That's okay. The bottom line is, the only way we will really be able to determine what he got paid, when he got paid, how he got paid, many before him and many after him, will be by conducting a formal audit. and that is one of the things that I'm going to do. We've had more mismanagement, more reckless spending under the Torres administration, a vindictive, going after individuals, destroying their lives to satisfy his political future. This is the last person we ever want running this city. He took money that he wasn't entitled to, and everybody should demand that money back. We shouldn't have to wait for the prosecutor's office to make a determination. The policy is clear. He took advantage of it, thinking that there was a loophole in it and nobody would question it. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Rodriguez. Why wouldn't you approve the $74,000 that Mr. Torres took on his last day in office?
Well, I would have asked the question, is he entitled to? I would have asked the question, you know I asked the question, I mind the store. I was oblivious of this whole thing. It went through, I still cannot find it on this document that I have. You know, usually Ross Forenza and the other gentleman come in there and says, you know, and give you a detail of the whole, a synopsis of what went on and who was recommending what. You know, they do have some type of, the BA have some type of leverage on certain major emergencies that arise within the city. For instance, they had to turn, you know, it's a big fire and they got to tear apart a house and whatever. As long as they get 3 estimate, they have up to an X amount of dollar that they don't have to come into city council and spend it. Now, I got to correct one of my Councilman Gao when he says that how is that the you know, the department didn't know that he wasn't going to get elected. That was after election. You know, election is in in May, and then this thing was caught in June, so it was after the fact. I did not know about this thing. I don't like, you know, I talk about city issue. I'm not here to talk about and bringing this for any political agenda or whatnot. I'm here to talk about the issues of our city. But this is one of my issues. Issue is that I struggle to pay my taxes. I struggle to pay my tuition for my kids. And my wife and I, we work so hard. We work so hard, you know, and this is not just one of them. You know, we had a lawyer that was here. She was corporation counsel. And at the end of the day, being corporation counsel on the Mayor's Torres administration, she happened to have another company somewhere and also getting jobs from the city. You know, these things got to stop. Those are jobs that we could give to a police officer, and that could have been a life that could have been prevented. Or a senior that could have some type of meal. You know, how we stopped the senior Christmas party. You know, it's a lot of stuff that we're not giving to our citizens because lack of money. But at the end of the day, we, the people that are running the city, are filling our pockets while others suffers. While I can't pay my rent at home and I'm going through the stress and I get involved into the alcohol, I'm just giving an example, into the drug because I'm stressed out, people are getting their pocket fat. And that to me is not government. You know, I've never touched a dollar here. I don't play that stuff. But at the end of the day, the reason why I bring this up, and I brought it up and I asked a question.
Mr. Rodriguez, your time is up, sir.
Thank you. Mr. Saya, why wouldn't you approve the $74,000 check that Mr. Torres took on his last day of office?
Thank you, Ms. Feliciano. First, I don't know why former Mayor Torres is questioning the competence of Councilman Morris. He's probably he's the best versed individual on finances anywhere. And former Mayor Torres repeatedly said, Councilman Morris signed off on it. This just shows a pattern of manipulation on the part of former Mayor Torres. He knew the system as far as offline checks are concerned. He knew that no one was going to see it. He told his subordinates, sign off on it. He also signed the check himself. But nevertheless, there's a major problem here as far as a pattern of manipulation. He told the subordinate, like I stated earlier, I want unused vacation time pay now because I'm going on vacation. And the subordinate, what else would she do? Made sure that a check was cut for $3,169, which he was forced to pay back. Now the Department of Community Affairs issues a letter to former Mayor Torres that says what he did was grossly inappropriate and potentially unlawful. What did he do? Instead of returning the money, another slap in the taxpayer's face. He hires a lawyer. That demonstrates some level of guilt, doesn't it? Also, let me be very clear, abundantly clear. An elected official is not entitled to unused sick, nor is he or she entitled to unused vacation time. If you are not sick, you shouldn't have your hand out asking for money. You should have your hands up to God, thanking him that you're healthy. It is unfortunate that Mayor Torres, in his pattern of manipulation, abused the taxpayers by taking money he was not entitled to, and now the prosecutor's office is looking into this matter, and we will get further determination. But we already heard from the Department of Community Affairs what he did was wrong, and he needs to give the money back immediately, because the City Council, by a 9-0 vote just last month, passed a resolution saying, give the money back. That's 9. The entire City Council said, you should give the money back. You should give the money back, Mayor.
Thank you. Mr. Torres.
Ms. Feliciano, as everyone experienced, we had a slight blackout. So cable is going to have to change the tape in order for us to continue. So if you would just pause your questions for a few minutes, we will go to a tape change. We have a little technical problem, so we're going to fix it, but it'll just take a few minutes. All right?
Sure.
Thank you. Mis-
See, Andre, if you close the store at 10, we can order Chinese now.
Okay, I apologize to our viewers. We had to take a slight break for a tape change because we had a technical problem. We will now move back to our candidate, Ms. Maria Teresa Feliciano, who is in the process of asking her second questions of her opponents. Ms. Feliciano, you may continue.
Thank you, Madam Clerk.
You're welcome.
Mr. Torres, your relationship with the Dominican community of Patterson was conflictive and rocky at best during your terms. Under your administration, there was a frontal attack to bodega owners where 42 of them were arrested. You didn't rehire or dismissed the first Dominican judge in Patterson. You have referred repeatedly, lately, or the last one in Dominican News, the newspaper, indicating that there are no qualified Dominicans to occupy public office in Patterson. Dominicans are the largest Latino group in Patterson. How are you planning to either ask for their trust or earn their trust?
First of all the comments you're stating are incorrect. They're outright lies. If you were to call the then judge, Gladys Garbin at Florida, she was offered for personal reasons. She opted not to take a reappointment. So that's a lie. If you were to see that I appointed what I call one of the highest respected Dominican women as deputy mayor after Rigo stepped down, the president of the statewide Dominican parade, Elsa Montilla, to be the voice, to be the voice and the connect and the tie between the Dominican community and the city of Patterson. If you say that she's not competent, then again, shame on you.
No, you said it.
No, you said that there was no competent people that could, but I appointed her, and she took it, and she stayed with the position until the end of my term. If you were to turn around and look at today, the director of the director of taxi and limousine services for the city is a person who I brought on, and he's of the Dominican descent, and so everything you're saying is false. Now, however, regarding the bodegas is not an attack. The bodega owners know very emphatically that I was a bodega owner, and my parents were the bodega owner. The fact of the matter is that there was some, not all, unscrupulous bodega owners who were selling a drug paraphernalia, and that wasn't my call. I'm not a police officer, I'm not the chief, and I'm not going to attempt to be it. But they got calls from residents complaining that some of these bodegas were selling drug paraphernalias disguised as a glass vial with a rose on it, and they were cutting scrub pads and making them as crack pipes. Now, if you think that type of open mercantile to support the destruction, you heard council members after council members talk about the destruction that drug is doing, and you have there happen to be a Dominican bodega owner doing this, probably if you're mayor, you would condone that. But what about the drugs that is going to destroy the rest of the residents, the non-Dominican community that exists in this city? So obviously, you have an agenda. Your agenda has been known, whether it was the redistricting of the 4th Ward to empower the Dominican community. I've done it by creating opportunities, giving jobs, putting people in positions that they could help the community. Yours is a different agenda, obviously.
I'm so sorry I can't answer.
No, Mr. Feliciano,
So
there's no
sorry.
rebuttal.
I'll do it at another time, another setting.
There's no rebuttal.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
That concludes my round of questions.
Yes, Ms. Feliciano. That concludes Ms. Feliciano's second round of questions to her opponents. We will move to our next candidate, who will present his second round of questions to his opponents. And that would be Mr. David B. Gilmore. Once again, to our viewers and our registered voters, you are hearing from your candidates for the office of mayor. They are now in a session where they're asking questions and answer period. Mr. Gilmore will now proceed with his second round of questions to his opponents. Mr. Gilmore, you may begin.
Thank you. I'd like to start with Mayor Jones. I know it's an old subject, but these things don't get old to me. It was in the beginning when you first took over office that energized me to begin this mission of questioning a governmental administration. It just happens to be you. At the time, and again, some folks may not appreciate it, but some may. And I really have to ask the question because I never got an answer. Tyron Franklin, Larry Franklin's son. I remember when he was born. He was a rookie police officer. His dad was the first black fire captain.
Correct.
He was gunned down on Broadway in the chicken store.
Correct.
Assassinated, if you will.
Correct.
Former Mayor Torres offered, and I don't know the ramifications or the parameters around the reward, but a reward was offered for $60,000
Correct.
for information leading to the arrest and/or conviction of the killer.
Correct.
Young man that used to work for my brother was the person, and I don't like to call him an informant. I think he was the
Good citizen.
good citizen, thank you, who was denied the reward money as was reneged when he went to collect. His name was put in the newspaper. It was a very unfortunate time and situation for Patterson, as I recall. And I didn't understand why you wouldn't pay the reward. Can you tell us why?
Well, I'm glad that you said in your opening that you don't understand all the details, because that's not true. The $60,000 was paid. That was done by the Torres administration. In the agreement that was written, and I don't remember the exact details, but there was some difficulty securing, and you can ask Mr. Torres later, or I can show you the documentation downstairs, or anybody else in the public. The city had a hard time gaining the full $60,000 that it had promised. That I wasn't the mayor. It had a hard time getting the $60,000. The individual's name and personal information was released. He was very aggressive, and I know him very well too, since I was a very young man. He expected to get what later came after the $60,000 was paid out, and that's really the crux of the issue. The contract spoke to $60,000. The city, some reward money, and everything did in fact meet that requirement. There was a balance of $7,000, which was not by the lawyers on any side or those who had offered the reward money, or additional reward money, I should say. There was no stipulation in what happens with that remaining, I think, $7,000. I'm not going to put his business in the street, but since you're throwing it out there, I'll follow up. He hired an attorney of his own volition. His attorney wanted to hold the funds in escrow, seeking whatever final judgment there was. My administration or I had a difficulty figuring out, well, if it's $60,000 and he's paid the $60,000, then what do we do with the $7,000? There's nothing that speaks to an entitlement. There's no contract of anything. Now, you could say, well, he should get it. That wasn't the terms of the contract. That was stipulated through the Torres administration. They took care of that, and they paid it out. I wanted to give the balance to the son of Tyrone Franklin. And we have documents, and I made sure that that was very clear. The individual did come see me rather regularly, and it became a question between his attorney and him, and how much of, if he got the $7,000, the attorney would get. So we recently, not more than 4 weeks ago, said, you know what? Don't know what the terms were. There's no stipulation on this remaining $7,000 balance. Give it to him. Because we were informed that the son was, the late Tyrone Franklin's son was being well taken care of. And to quibble over, and it wasn't even $7,000, it turned out to be like $5,000. So we did authorize it. So the facts are, yes, Tyrone was killed senselessly and needlessly. Yes, there was a $60,000 award, not by this administration, the previous administration. The terms were up to $60,000. They wind up and weren't able to meet it at first and did fulfilled it, and then there was an additional dollars that came long after.
Mr. Jones?
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Sayer. Council President Sayer. I am very familiar with the MOU, DCA, MOU. I've read a couple of them. I have the current one. And I believe that you and others look at, by lack of follow-up and demonstrated punitive measures, that the DCA is a paper tiger. I believe you think they're a paper tiger. I want to, and maybe you can prove me wrong, but as president of the council, and you've had no qualms about going around the mayor's office prior. Case in point, you mentioned earlier being proud of going to the state to get the contract or bonding money for the hotel. You did that. You wear that as a badge of honor. What stopped you from doing the same thing if in fact you're going to use as an excuse that it was the administration that was supposed to do it, to create the fee structure for parades, festivals, bicycle paths, circus, whatever you want to call it, coming to town for DPW and or police support, public safety for those matters. It came under your watch. Matter of fact, it came before you started. But under your watch, it was renewed for the request to have that completed with a completion date that has since gone past, and now we're going back another year around with parades coming up now that have no fee structure designed to hold these people to their fair share of what has been an overburdened amount of money to the taxpayers these past few years, because we cannot afford to do that. What have you done, and why haven't you done anything about it to date?
Well, unfortunately, Mayor Jones dropped the ball on that one because
I knew
he
you were gonna
failed,
blame him.
excuse me, he failed to meet with parade leaders. As a matter of fact, he couldn't hammer out a compromise. So what happened as a result? The Dominican parade takes the city to court, they win, and it costs taxpayers money. As mayor, that would be an initiative for me to sit down with all the parade organizers, because we appreciate our ethnicity. It is our strongest asset in this city, the great people that have decided to call Patterson home. I will sit with them and reach a compromise that is fair to both parties, Patterson and the parades, to make sure that ultimately the taxpayer will benefit. But unfortunately, the Jones administration failed at an end. We found ourselves in court. The city of Patterson lost. It was devastating to the taxpayers. And you can't stop parades. In fact, I encourage people to participate in the parades that we have now. But it's going to take real leadership that knows you have to sit down with the parade organizers and thoroughly explain the situation before you force them to do anything. Because above everything, most of them are Pattersonians, and most of them are taxpayers as well. It'll take real leadership to get that fee structure in place, and when I'm mayor, I will work with the parades to make sure that a fair compromise is reached.
Councilman Rigo,
Present.
I'm going to ask you to explain what he just said in the best way that you can, because it was nothing more than a political statement, when in fact, what he's talking about happened the previous year. I'm talking about this year. This year, every opportunity for this council, under President Andre Sayers' watch, you were there, you were a witness, you sat right over there in that same chair, he sits over there. You saw the whole thing. Help me understand, Councilman Rigo, what happened?
Help you understand what?
Why we did not get a fee structure as DCA mandated us to do for the parades and everything else, to include not one particular parade, but for all of them. I'm not picking on anybody in the parade. But why we didn't get any work done towards establishing a fee structure fair and equitable to all of the people that want to participate using Patterson resources in parades and festivals and so forth.
The reason why we haven't moved on to that is because that is in the mayor's hands. He's the one that had to come up with how much we spend within the department, DPW, police department, and the mayor, I guess he just didn't want to bother with it. We had asked, as a matter of fact, Councilman McCoy, a few times when they celebrated the parade, they asked for the, and we were asking for the fee. Councilman McCoy was very vocal about how can you ask for for certain things when you haven't given us a synopsis on how much we spend, based on what and whatnot. At the same time, when it comes to the parade, it seems like, let's rock it like it is. We go through parades. The Afro-American goes on Broadway. The Dominican parade goes up on Park Ave, and the Peruvian comes on Main Street. We have the Puerto Ricans on Market Street. But at the end of the day, it seems like every parade is an issue for everybody here. If we're going to have the parade, let's have the parade. And if we're not going to have a parade, let's not have the parade. But you can't just come into a community that contributes so much to our city, throughout communities, and then just say, stop a parade, or shorten it out the way they shorten the Dominican and the way that they rush the one in the Afro-American on Broadway. So the reason why we don't have a structure on that is because the mayor has not stepped up to the plate and brought to the council what is the expenses that we acquire during that weekend, not just that day, during the weekend. So if that answers your question, I hope you take it as an answer, because at the end of the day, we, the council, cannot go into no department and literally tell them what we need and when and how and what they're going to do. It's a executive duty to do that.
Councilman Gao, I would ask you the same question. Since you're not on the council anymore, you may not feel obligated to give me the same answer. I'm looking for something a little different than that.
You're talking about the fee structure and why
Yeah.
it wasn't set up?
Right.
Well, it does come from the mayor's office. The mayor's the one that calculates all the expenses of the parades. Those parade members have to meet with the mayor and his staff, and they have to create a budget, and they have to know exactly where they're going. If and once that is established, it will be presented to the council to be put in the form of an ordinance. Now, we know the biggest problem with that was that the parades, because there were so many of them, there was a tremendous cost to that, specifically police, EMTs, DPW, and those costs were always shifted to the taxpayer. And that became a very big issue. So I don't know where it is at this point in time. I don't know if they have it or not, or if they haven't done it or not, but it ultimately starts there, and then eventually comes down to the municipal council.
Director Ivey, I would like to ask you the same question, but let me add a caveat to that. If you were the mayor, and this situation is, well, obviously it's going to continue because we have no ordinance. Tell me how you would go about it as well, and or do you believe that the mayor's office and or the council needs to establish a better working relationship, of which this would be one of those items to bring a project to fruition? But give it to me in your words. Thank you.
As a matter of fact, I do sit in cabinet meetings, and these meetings and this discussion has been on the table since this administration started. And if I'm not mistaken, there is a resolution that has been forwarded to council, and I believe the council president has those ordinances in committee, and so we have been trying to get this through. One of the concerns are, and I work very closely with the BA because I really do report directly to the business administrator, so I know about these kinds of conversations, and I also know that DCA, because I also have privy to the MOU. Understanding, yeah, and. DCA is holding the council accountable to move this stuff forward. One of the concerns and one of the issues are that it's impacting the people. And it's not about the parade, it's not about the citizens, it's about generating revenue so that we don't have to increase our taxes, our property taxes, to pay for these parades. Yes, everybody should have a parade, and yes, as mayor, I will make sure that fee scale goes in, because what's wrong with that? There's nothing wrong with that. Other communities are supporting their efforts to have parades so that they don't break the backs of the city. So yeah, it's stuck, but it ain't stuck here. Thank you.
Well, that's quite emphatic. I'm going to see you celebrating. Excuse me. Allergies killing me. Mayor Torres.
Same question?
Yes, please.
Okay. I'm glad that Director Ivey put it right where it belongs. You know, the governing body, the municipal council, the city council is the one who governs the laws and the purse strings of the city. Just like they have an obligation when it comes to the budget, the mayor transmitted, They could add, they could delete, they could make amendments, and then it sends it to DCA to get ultimate approval, then it's a done deal. I say that to say this. The approach should have been that, yes, there's a conversation, there's some guidance from the mayor's office, but that should have been to the council president. The council president should have taken the initiative, and this council is divided in all committees. Chairman of Public Safety, Chairman of Community Development, Chairman of Human Services, all of them. So there then, they should be able to come up with the users' departments and say, sit down with the director and say, well, how could we come up with a dollar figure that the residents could work with, that the parade organizers could live with?
Exactly.
Secondly, to echo Councilman Rodriguez's comment, I think that it probably behooves everybody not to do one parade, but to set a standard parade route where it has the least negative impact on the community. It's easier to clean, it doesn't create traffic congestion, and guess what? Then you don't need to have different requirements for police officers. If it's the Dominican parade, for some reason, they say, the police department tells them that they need 100 police officers. If it's the African American parade, maybe 50. So there should be standards, because I do not think that New York City, going right down the canal or of fame there down Broadway, that they actually have different rate structures. So they have to come up with a rate structure that they could present, talk to the department heads, present it to the governing body puts it. It's no different, council members, what we did when I was a councilman, when we actually did the carnival. We did the carnival, and then we said that in every park, you got to do the carnival different years. You can only have one per year at any given site. And that alleviate everybody jockeying to get the prime spots to hold their annual carnivals and bazaars. It's a carnival, bazaar, and festival ordinance. Make that amendment, incorporate the fees, and move on.
Did I exhaust my questions, or I want to thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Gilmore. That concludes Mr. Gilmore's second round of questions. Our next candidate who will present his second round of questions to his opponents is Mr. Aslan Gal, Sr. Once again, Mr. Gal will be presenting his questions to his opponents. Please understand that the candidates may ask their opponents questions in any order that they choose. At this time, I just want to remind our voters who were voting at the YWCA, we had to change that polling site. That's in the 5th Ward, 1st District. It's been changed from the YWCA to the Reverend William Griffin Homes at 199 Carroll Street. The entrance is on Ellison Street. It's right across the street from the YWCA. Our voters who live in that district and ward, 5th Ward, 1st District, will be receiving a card to just notify them of the polling place change. But it's right across the street from the Y, so please, if you have any problems or any questions regarding the change of the polling site, please call the office of the city clerk. At this time, we will move to Mr. Aslan Gal Sr., who will present his second round of questions to his opponents. Mr. Gal, you may begin.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. My first question is to Mr. Torres. Mr. Torres, in multiple debates, you speak about your success and great performance as a business administrator in Jackson Township and your dedication to public service. During the budget process, the Jackson City Council recorded these comments about your performance as business administrator. Campbell Brown, PBA president, stated that he finds the administrator taking vacation now when they have 2 weeks to put this budget through is inexcusable. Jackson Councilman Cafton stated that he asked about Administrator Torres' vacation time, and he still can't get a straight answer. Jackson Councilwoman Revere stated that she thinks that this might not be the most appropriate time to go on vacation. One resident said that when there was a big project she was working on, her boss wouldn't let her take off. She was confused why Administrator Torres is taking vacation during the budget process, and that Torres doesn't understand what is needed in Jackson, and that this could be hurting the town of Jackson. The mayor agreed that, and it stated, he was told by Torres about vacation and he took off, and that they never talked about it, but it would be addressed. Since in many forums you have used your performance as business administrator in Jackson as one of the reasons Patterson should vote for you, can you explain to us why you calculated your vacation time and took off during such a critical time in the final budget process? And what was the outcome of that budget deal? And did the township have to lay off any police or municipal employees?
Thank you for that question. Do you want to put for the record what year that was? Do you have that information?
Do you?
No, do you? You posing the question when these folks said that.
I'm asking you a general question.
I need to remember,
I'm
so.
asking you a general question.
Do you know the year when those comments were made, Councilman?
I'm asking.
Former Councilman?
Mayor, you want to answer the question? I asked you a question. I don't see what's so funny.
Okay, first of all, listen, I take very pride in that.
Just explain yourself.
I take very pride in me being the business administrator for the third largest city, township geographically, over 100 square miles. The issue with Campbell Brown, first of all, I entered into a contract to take on the position of business administrator. Prior to entering into the contract, I advised the mayor that I was going to be on vacation because that was a predetermined vacation. And so he agreed that I could take on the vacation. It was then at that time when I took office, Jackson was a furlough town. It had no contracts negotiated, and it was running at a deficit. I'm proud that that first budget, that was the first budget when I arrived to Jackson, even the part that I wasn't there during the budget hearings, I was able to not have no layoffs with cops, and at that budget time, we were going to lose 1/3 of the police officers. I not only entered into a contract with the PBA, but all other 4 collective bargaining agreements. We then gave credit to those collective bargaining agreements. They were on the furlough town for 2 years, and I gave them earned income for them to go ahead and get their monies back that they lost as a result of the furlough. Thirdly, then, we put out a referendum to the voters, and they did not approve it, but we were still able to negotiate with concessions. All the police officers were hired, a contract was settled, they got off a furlough, and I brought the budget in below the 2% cap as mandated by the state of New Jersey. Those are the same obstacles that I believe probably those are the reason why the city of Jackson hired me, and those are the reason why my ability to have solid budget experience, labor negotiations, and procurement. I also serve as their purchasing agent as well, saving the city, the township of Jackson, tens of thousands of dollars a year. So I'm proud of my appointment as business administrator. That was the first one. Since then, Campbell Brown is no longer president of the PBA. Catherine has been voted out of office. Councilman Rivera is the same way. And so I am proud, very proud of my accomplishments. And this week we were talking about 2010, when I took 2011, which was my first budget upon my arrival at Jackson Township. Since then, I've done 3 other ones, and I'm proud to say that just past Tuesday, we transmitted a budget, average home of $323,000. The municipal portion of the budget that I transmitted only has a $32 increase, and still lower than the 2% mandated by the state of New Jersey.
Wonderful. You saved them thousands, you cost us millions.
Mr. Gao, there's no rebuttal, please.
Thank you, Madam Clerk.
Don't be a hater.
My question is to Mayor Jones. Mayor Jones, what do you say to the Patterson residents who say they're ready to give up and leave due to the crime and high taxes in our city?
Okay. Well, I understand wholeheartedly and clearly what the residents are saying about crime and high taxes. I also understand how they feel about the shootings and not knowing their neighbors and not having a whole lot of confidence in government, state, federal, county, that kids are not learning in public schools as we'd like. I understand. What I won't say to them or anyone else is be afraid. The question I asked you earlier about crime was very simple. A person can easily throw the the boogeyman out with no definition, with no expectation, without anything, and try to make people afraid. I wouldn't want to live in a city that always try to keep me afraid. The realities that exist here in this city are real. It's a hard city. We're the third largest, with people coming in who don't care. And folks have retreated back to their front porches and behind their front doors because we're afraid. Churches have closed and all of that. But I think, and my response is, you made it very clear that your reasons for crime is vendetta. It's about payback to what Torres and whatever the police department you believe did to you. That's what this is about. It's not about anything else. If it was about crime, then I think we'd be seeing something different. But to the public, and to answer the question, if I have it, let me say it again. I take no comfort in not being able to solve crime. I take no comfort in having gone from 509 police officers to 396. I take no comfort in having folks talk about what they did to DCA to get special police officers. I did it. And so with this job as mayor, I get all the benefits when everything goes right, but I take the hit when everything goes wrong. I don't have a magic wand or a magic bullet, and I know you're not asking for that. It's going to take community to get engaged. I need you not to quit. I need to extend my hand and the community and the directors and the staff in terms of full engagement. And I'll close and say this, but our problem is not you and me. It's the folks who we don't know, who are in our neighborhoods, who don't care about us, so we're going to have to stay communicated. That's our challenge. It always has been. So that's what I would say. Not vendetta, about partnership. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Just bear with me 1 second. Councilman Saya, I just need a point of clarification. In my earlier question to you about block by block, you responded back to me that that was field strategies. Am I confused, or is field strategy something different than block by block?
No, not at all. Just as a point of clarification, Field Strategies is block by block. The official title of this entity is Field Strategies. They've been involved in several successful campaigns. That's why I hired them, because I plan to be successful in this campaign. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes my questions, Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Gao. That concludes Mr. Aslan Gao's second question to his opponents. We will now move to our next candidate, Mr. Jeffrey Jones, who will pose his second question to his opponents. We are currently watching our second round of question and answers that our candidates are asking their opponents, and we will now move to Mr. Jeffrey Jones to now ask his second question at this time. Mr. Jones, you may begin.
Thank you. This question is for Ms. Feliciano, and it has to do with the process of governance. Tonight you heard not long ago about how parades and festivals, and that was part of your question. So let me just give you some background if I can. A meeting was held here with all parade and festival organizers, and that was a big to-do. It's all in the paper. And we wound up going to court purposely, not necessarily purposely, but we wound up going to court because it was important to find out why we couldn't get an ordinance in place, because the council refused to act on it. The council president currently still has, and for the record, still has all that information that he's holding and has been holding in committee, and I actually have the file downstairs by which Corporation Counsel sent to him. There's a question, Madam Clerk. As mayor, and I like the fact that you speak to policy, as mayor, you're going to find that some of the vision, some of the ideas that you have are not accepted by members of the council. Some will start to threaten your administration 2 years in, and I think you're starting to see how this works. What would you do if you submitted everything in accordance and timely and have the documentation and you still had folks playing politics with your constituents rather than doing the job? What would you advance and how would you inform the public?
I'll hit him over the head in public.
You hit him in the head in public? Okay.
Well, that was for you or me?
No,
That
that's
is for
me.
Mr. Feliciano.
Oh, I'd like that
No,
question
no,
too.
no, that we don't condone violence. I think it's a very difficult position that the mayor is put in, because playing politics can be very effective and put you in a position where, you know, you're damned if you do and you're darned if you don't. Diversity is our city, one of our city's biggest assets, as you yourself have put forth. We are a microcosm of the world. Patterson is, not many cities can say that. And of course, that's one of our assets that we should utilize. I have some ideas on how to do it, for tourism, for many other things. But that diversity comes from the strength of the different etnias and groups that chose Patterson as their hometown and that made the contribution here. Parades is one of the most basic, I think, expressions of that diversity, the culture and the identification of a cultural group, and as such, is very valuable to the city. The reality of what it costs and how a cultural activity or event like that works with the city to make sure that it does take place. And
It's okay. Keep going. It's fine.
no, it was a sign or piece of the ceiling that fell off. It's all okay? In answering your question, Mr. Mayor, I think that it would be wise, obviously, and I'm sure that that's what you intend to do, to coordinate, to agree to meet with the groups regarding the fees and how a parade takes place. And then I think you should expose the ones using a difficult situation politically and say it. Have the meetings openly. Publish the meetings that you have and your efforts at resolving or facilitating the situation. Let it be known. Make it transparent. Make it public.
Thank you. Provided you finish. You still have time.
No, that's
Okay.
my answer.
I know I've heard you said you want that question. I'm just going to phrase it just a little bit differently for a reason. The question really is for you, Mr. Gilmore. As mayor, you do not have the responsibility to put together an ordinance, and as much as people want to define it, you don't. You have to rely on your department heads to do it, and they rely on their field staff and whatever else, or their staff and whatever else the case is. And through your business administrator, it is presented to the council or through committee. Committee is provided that information so that they can not vote on it during committee, but to be apprised of what the intent and the purpose is. So therefore, the information sharing begins at the committee. So the question is, if in fact the administration, based on Faulkner, has the sole authority to review and prepare and submit to the council for approval, financial or in terms of legislation, what do you do when you have an obstructive council or council president who will not, for whatever the reasons, but make every effort to make the impact to the public less likely?
Great question. and I'm glad you've allowed me the opportunity to answer that question. A couple things first. Bottom line is, most of the people that sit up here, not all, but most of the people that sit up here want to be mayor. That's a given. You got to fight that the whole time you're in. Somebody else wants your job, and they're sitting here, and sometimes they may not be the best advocate for you and or the administration. But I tell you this, in order for me to be effective, what I would do is I would come to the council meetings. You see, because there's this placard up here that says Dave Gilmore Mayor, it would be over there, and I'd be sitting there at the council meetings to include workshop. I'm going to be there. I'm there now for nothing. I don't get paid to come. I'm on them almost every meeting. My attendance at these meetings is probably better than some of the council members. So I think that's part of it. To establish a relationship, a working relationship with those people that are sitting here and asking them to do things or working with them, you have to have a relationship. It can't be once every now and then and be confrontational. You have to have a working relationship. I believe I can do that. I believe that people have come to know me as a no-nonsense guy. But I'm not coming here with an agenda to try to make anybody look bad or to not get things done. My thing is quantifiable results on a daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, annual basis. Being able to talk about the things that we were able to accomplish. And that will only happen by interacting with the council. I will be sitting there at these meetings. If I'm not there, my designee would be there, but most of the time I will be there. I vow to be sitting in that chair at these meetings. I think that's how it happens. They have to learn to trust you. They have to know that you're going to be there and you will be a part of making it happen. They're part-time employees. The mayor is a full-time employee. That's what you have to do. You have to be cohesive. You have to work with them. They have to trust you. And that's what I think makes it happen.
Mr. Gow, earlier you spoke about the process by which funds and offline checks or other can in fact be written and submitted, and unless finance department is actually given a complete, I forgot what the official financial term is, and I'm drawing up. But unless we have the details, have had those details that speaks to what a check is about, could you just enlighten us, if you will, how else would the council know the facts of any document that has to deal with the budget unless, I mean, how would you know? That's really the question. How would the city council know the details of any budget outside of the administration providing it in some form or fashion?
They wouldn't. It has to go through the process. It all comes from the mayor's office and his department heads, his finance people. Whatever it may be, whatever check it may be, whatever has to do with the budget, it's all coming from the administration and eventually presented to the finance chairperson, whoever that may be at the time, and then you have your committee, and that's pretty much where you determine what's going to be approved and what's not going to be approved. All too many times, and the check that Mayor Torres took, and he claims that others have taken it before him, is a perfect example. Somebody cut that check, somebody approved that check, someone authorized that check, and then it had to go to the next stage, and that was where the Finance Committee is. The check that was cut for Torres was an offline check. And interestingly, while the mayor may not hand sign every check, there's a stamp that has his signature on it. And the very check that he accepted has his stamp on it. Now, they say that's, that's common, the mayor's signature, but ultimately, when you have a signature on a check, somebody has to be accountable for it. And if it's done manually and you're not there, and let's say Mr. Zambrano, for example, is the acting finance chair, he can basically just put the mayor's stamp on any check he wants. That doesn't make sense. So they received the check was cut, it was based on information that was provided to the finance director, assistant finance director, because that's what he is, he's the assistant finance director. And it was approved or cut because he received the information that requested it. And procedurally, it goes as I stated, I don't want to be redundant, back to the chairman, and unless they say, listen, this is specific for this reason, you know, he wouldn't know. Did they tell him? Maybe they did, maybe he didn't. But he sure did not tell the committee as a whole, and it was never read into the payment of bills, as we all know.
Ms. Ivy, you've been familiar with DCA for 4 years. You've been privileged to MOUs and some of the language, and you've also had meetings with DCA, as have most of the directors, on a regular basis. You're seeking the office of mayor, and in that, you now have some familiarity with this DCA, not the ones of the past, this DCA, and their stringent measures with an MOU. Having that insight, and understanding that this governor, through his DCA, has been less than supportive, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but in order to frame the question, what differently do you think you could do, considering the history, the experience, and the need for the city of Patterson to have brought about or bring about a different DCA outcome with the city of Patterson, if at all?
Thank you. One of the things that is great about me is that I stay positive. I have to think positive. I know that we could change relationships. It's about building trust. It's about opening the lines of communication. It's about coming to a compromise. Effective communication is also something that I am privileged to be blessed with. And I have been in very difficult situations and difficult conversations, but I have made serious headway. So there is a way. There's definitely a way. I always believe there's a way. And when you do have those kinds of conversations, you map out what your plan is, you meet with people, and you show your sincerity and know that there's going to be a compromise somewhere. I'm not always going to have my way, I know that, but the purpose is to work for the greater good. The greater good of the city is to build effective relationships with the DCA as well as the governor. Thank you.
Fair enough. Mr. Rodriguez, a moment ago, you mentioned that the administration failed to, I believe, and I won't put words in your mouth, but failed to handle the parade ordinance. The question I have for you could be a yes or no, or whatever much detail as you want to. Are you aware of the document forwarded by the current Corporation Council, the revisions of the parade ordinances with fees? Are you aware of that, the dates and the attempts that it was submitted to the council? Were you at any of the workshop meetings by which that discussion presented by then the business administrator, Mr. Charles Thomas? And have you had a chance to see the files?
How many questions are there? I mean, is it one or is it three
fair
questions?
enough, fair enough.
Well,
The question is,
you know, the ball bounced back.
I know.
The reality is that you have not come up with a responsible method on how to rule the parades and the bazaar license and all that stuff. And now what you're doing, you're putting a stop that nobody can get a permit for anything in the summer, knowingly that they have what's called a time frame to submit those applications. Mayor, has been a lot of failure here, and a lot of them has been follow-up. You have not followed up with these things. Like I said it before, Councilman McCoy, I remember discussing sort of a parade thing at the time when it was too late for us to put a resolution together, because this entity they nonprofit. They live out of donation. You can't come over here in May and tell somebody for the fees and the structure on something for June. And that's what happened at that time. Then it bounced back to your administration, never was brought back to us with a constructive, a cohesive understanding of the council and the administration on how we're going to rule these things. So, you can sit there and say, well, the council has it, but at the end of the day, you had just not come here, and say, hey, look, I put a resolution there 6 months ago, and Council President has it, if that was the issue, and has he brought it up to you or not? That's what a mayor does. A mayor's supposed to be on top of his game. He's supposed to find out what goes on. I need it now in November or October for next year. So I could send a letter to those entities, and they know what is they gonna face next year. You can't come here in May, or April or May, and say, 2 months before a parade. These people take their permit, and they do their party, their galas, and all that stuff beforehand. And, they expect a certain amount of money to be spent at the parade, and based on that, they do schedule their fairs and whatnot. So, you could come, you could say anything, but at the end of the day, it was your call. It was not, the procedures in city council or in the city is each department responsible for certain things in here could come up with a resolution or an ordinance. And then we discuss that with our department head or with the administration, and we either approve or disapprove, or we tweak it away, we tweak some things on it and whatnot. But at the end of the day, that is your call, because it's an administrative thing.
Thank you, Mr. Rodriguez.
Madam Clerk, I need a moment, please.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. I'm back. Thank you.
It seems to bother you to tell the truth.
Mr. Rodriguez, there's no rebuttal. Please.
I took a moment, Councilman. Maybe you should.
No, you should take a extra moment.
Gentlemen, please respect the forum guidelines. Thank you.
Mr. Saya, less than a month ago, you advanced on the agenda of the City Council for Passaic County an effort and initiative for energy. It was actually called Concord. You placed it on the workshop agenda. Actually, you didn't. You didn't go through the committee, and I'll put it in the form of a question. I just want to make sure I bring to your mind what we're referring to. Your council president, you've advised everyone that you're, I'll say, law-abiding, and you're conscientious, and you're consistent, and you're aggressive at reform. Could you please explain to the public and myself how it is that you were, under the leadership of the presidency, able to place a single item, considering what both Councilman Gao and Councilman Rodriguez stated about the process, where you knew that the county did not fully vet this cooperative, where you knew that the freeholders had not met on this, and when you knew that none of your colleagues were even aware that you had placed this sweetheart deal on the agenda for the city, and it had to be removed because A, the business administration said it had not been vetted by both purchasing nor the city. Well, you know the question, and you know what you know the question. So please advise us and explain to us how you feel that it was okay to place this stuff on an agenda without any kind of council or administration involvement that was ultimately going to hurt the city by giving a deal to friends at Passaic County, if you don't mind.
Mayor, once again, you're mistaken. That resolution went through committee, went through the Community Development Committee. And members of your administration actually reached out to county officials, your purchasing agent, and your business administrator. They compared notes, thought it was a good idea, we placed it on the agenda. Unfortunately, we did not get the 5 votes. We will revisit it, because energy aggregation is an ordinance we adopted so we could save taxpayers money. But in the 4 years you've been in office, you only cost taxpayers money. 29% tax increase, and most recently with Brian Sweeney, your failure to handle that situation cost taxpayers $312,000. As a council person, as a council president, I've advanced initiatives to save taxpayers money. In fact, it was documented 2 weeks ago with our healthcare insurance reform ordinance that I co-sponsored with Councilman Tavares, saved the taxpayers $2.1 million. The recycling initiative, we've increased our rate from 6% to 20%. So in all my efforts, I've saved the taxpayer money. In your 4 years as mayor, you've cost the taxpayers money.
I don't need another moment. Mr. Torres, you just heard Mr. Saya express how he saved the city, how the process regarding this particular cooperative through the county, how because of his due diligence solely and because of his expertise and the fact, and I'll go through the stuff because I want to make sure we're real clear, how it was the administration who submitted it and we worked in partnership. If all that was true, because there's a question here, if all that was true, that the administration had done this in partnership, then the question becomes, at least so that I can ask you your question, is why then would we need the council to do what we already done? Therefore, you have been a mayor and on the council. Have you ever seen such a case where, and please explain, as a result of council inaction, and speak to it, that the police department violation of a contract in terms of 2011 in Irene, where they were not paid timely within the 2 weeks provisions within the contract, and it resulted in a $1.9 million suit by which the city had to pay because negligence of legislation. And if you could help us, because I think the public would like to know how $1.9 million comes out. So as best you can, help us with that, please.
I'm going to try, but I think we have it. First and foremost, the process of energy aggregation, you got to see that there's a direct tie, everything that Councilman Saya or Council President do regarding covering or garnering favors for the treasurer of the county, and the county operation, and the county chairman. And so this happened to be that everybody vetted it except the right persons to do it. What he doesn't know, and I know as a business administrator and as a purchasing agent, is that even before it comes up to a vote, the energy aggregation consultant must have an approval by the Board of Public Utilities. And so what he's not saying was that the Concordian group was a client of Billy Pasquarelle's lobbying company, and this is just another way of Councilman Saya, circumventing the pay-to-play laws, and so that way it's all about the treasurers and protecting the treasurers. Now, when the county represents the largest portion of the tax bill, which supports the sheriff department and supports county government, Ray Charles could see why he got the endorsement of the party and the county organization. So the fact of the matter is that energy aggregation it is a viable source, but he didn't want to do it to pass on the savings to the residents. He wanted to do it to pass on the savings to the broker who was really making the money off the deal. So yes, the vetting process. Now, may the late Marty Barnes rest in peace, but Marty did one thing which will stay with good governance and should be historically documented, and I'm saying it tonight. Marty created the system of a strong committee system within the governing body, and that's why all the committee assignments were done. And so therefore, it's not so that a council president puts something on the agenda, he refers it to the committee. The committee then has to speak to the department head who's going to generate the resolution or the ordinance, and therefore then is discussed, is brought back into the committee workshop of the governing body, and then it's approved by all the members whether it's going to come on. Obviously, what he did here was a way of just circumventing the process, which is we know why he's doing it. So there is a process, and unfortunately, the same thing, controlling it so that way, he favors the county organization, which was the real deal here. This is the business that he's putting back in business.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Thank you, everyone.
That concludes Mr. Jones' second question to his opponents. We will now move on to our next candidate, who will ask her second question of her opponents. Ms. Donna R. Nelson Ivy will now be asking her second question to her opponents. Once again, we are in the Mayor's Candidates Forum. Our candidates are concluding with their second question to their opponents, and as we move along, we will be giving you additional election tips. Ms. Ivy, you can begin.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Council President, I have been in your company for over 6 years as you serve as a member of the council, and now president of the council. Can you please share with us at least one meaningful decision that you gave birth to, and as a result, implemented a successful program?
There's more than one, but I'll give you everything I have. Meaningful decision as far as saving this city money. I mentioned it before. The Healthcare Insurance Reform Act. I had studied this thoroughly. I saw that it worked in other municipalities, and I said it's got to work in Patterson. And as demonstrated, as documented, it's saving the taxpayers $2.1 million. This is something I'm very proud of. As far as another initiative is concerned, Sustainable Jersey, where the component deals with saving this city money. Again, putting the emphasis on increasing our recycling rate so that ultimately the taxpayer will save money. I'm proud of the decisions I've made to save taxpayers money.
For my remaining colleagues, I am going to ask a question, Madam Clerk, and if they can have the option, because the hour is getting late, as to whether to answer it or not, will be fine by me.
Certainly. Ms. Ivy, if you ask the question, we'll just go down the line. If they don't, they decide they don't want to respond, the candidates can just state
Excellent. Thank you. The mayor's primary job is to be the caretaker for the entire city, a huge job. As I have extensive experience with developing effective partnerships, as mayor, I know I must develop partnerships with the residents, the city council, county officials, state legislators, DCA, the governor, and our city employees / public servants, businesses, faith-based community, and nonprofit organizations. Obviously, this will help with setting the tone for the culture and the future of the city's operations. As my plan outlines, I include building partnerships with all entities as I have already described. Please describe your hands-on experience with developing such partnerships and the projects that you have successfully completed as a result.
Ms. Feliciano, would you like to respond to Ms. Ivy's question?
Yes, and I will do it briefly. I have worked on projects, including strategic partnerships, beginning with, I'm trying to think which one goes first. As part of the state-mandated Minority Concerns Committee established in the state of New Jersey by order of the Chief Justice Wallens, late Chief Justice, we coordinated an effort statewide to create awareness, to disseminate information about the court system and its services, and it was an effort, a statewide effort, to reach out to the community, basically, and connect it with the judiciary from the perspective of what services we offer and how the community could both benefit and contribute to those efforts. For that statewide effort, we attracted or reached out to organizations, community organizations, the community of faith, the business sector, in a way that we worked out a plan to including a publicity package, forums, open forums, public forums, and seminars. Reach out the largest percentage of the population that we could. This was a project that took about 7 years. As the president of a national advocacy organization, the Dominican American National Roundtable, I reached out and built partnerships for strategic objectives and projects with national entities, state entities, again, corporate level, and at the local level, the grassroots level. So this was another project that took reaching out and bringing to the table different partners at different levels, pretty much the way that you have described the city of Patterson needs to do. It's absolutely necessary or indispensable that we not only identify, define our partners, state, federal, local partners, but that we strengthen and develop those relationships to the benefit both of the city and the partners.
Thank you.
Mr. Gilmore, would you like to respond?
Yes, I've got numerous ones to which I'd like to start explaining. I know I'm going to run out of time. But let me start with, I was a panel member selected by Chris Dodd, Senator Chris Dodd, the state of Connecticut, to work on legislation for neighborhood revitalization zones, which was adopted, and hundreds of millions of dollars came to the state for neighborhood revitalization zones. I also worked as a coordinator for that project and also for minority business development, to which I was also given the United States Small Business Administration Minority Business Advocate of the Year Award for the state of Connecticut. When I was a community service agency director for 5 towns, and all the effort and work that we did to coordinate activities for poor people, I was also offered or given the statewide Martin Luther King Community Activist Award. I worked with numerous organizations like the OIC, of which you have one here as well, for helping disenfranchised poor and others to back to work for that. I was a project manager for IBM Aerospace, of which we coordinated a $250 million project some 20 years ago, of which to combine systems management and controls, documentation, process, policy, and procedures, something I say all the time, for that United Technologies Corporation, combining all of their systems into one data center. I've been involved with numerous, too many to mention, projects and collaborations and other public and private agencies over the years to say that I would not be proficient in providing that same guidance at this entity. I'm not downsizing or saying that this isn't an important or a task worth taking, but it doesn't compare to some of the work that I've done. This is not hard. This is not something that can't be done. It's all it takes is people that have experience and know how to do the job, and I'm that person. So I mean, that's just a small list of some of the things. And I got a bunch of stuff hanging on my wall if you want to come by the house and see it.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Gal, would you like to respond to the question?
I'll just make a brief comment. I don't think it's as much as what we've done, but I think it's more about what we're going to do. And the next mayor is going to have his hands full. The first thing, aside from trying to make the city clean and safe and addressing all of the quality of life issues, it's not going to be a very easy task. People are going to line up. All the nonprofit organizations right now, as we speak, are being promised a host of things, and they think that based on that, whoever this next mayor is going to be or whoever's making that promise, they're going to have total access. Well, you know what? You're going to have to be inclusive. It may not be right, but everybody's going to have to be inclusive, and everybody's going to have to carry their own. Not everybody's going to be satisfied, and it's just a question of how do we reach everyone? How do we make everybody happy? Well, we're going to need a plan, and we're going to need a real plan that's going to allow us to do this. I'll just say, while many have done and made significant contributions, as I stated before, and I'll state again, that this next mayor is going to be overwhelmed, and as long as, or unless he has the right qualified people and the most qualified people in those areas to assist him, they're not going to be successful. It's not going to take one single individual as a mayor. It'll take a whole team of people. I like Mr. Gilmore's style. I like what Mr. Gilmore brings to the table. I would love to bring Mr. Gilmore as part of my team. God willing, I'm elected as mayor. And I would hope that everybody else on this panel will consider thinking about what kind of talent we all bring to this table and how we can all benefit each other. So it's not going to be easy. And many can talk about the things they have done. And, you know, while one may say it might be a piece of cake, it's not going to be a piece of cake. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gal. Mr. Jones?
I think the question was about consensus building? Pretty much? Well,
Sorry. Yes, partnerships, developing partnerships with all of the entities.
with all the entities?
Yes,
Okay.
citizens to,
In terms of style, or just
How-
the availability, and how does that get accomplished?
yes, and how would
Okay.
you do that?
Okay.
And what you have done successful in terms of building partnerships in the past.
Well, let me use an example, first and foremost, with the Chamber of Commerce that exists in the city of Patterson. The Chamber of Commerce was for quite some time, the single source of supporting small business. That was abundantly clear when we got here. We didn't have an economic development director in community development at the time. The PRC was already in effect. UEZ was the 3.5% low-interest loans, 3.5% rather than the 7% taxes in the city, and the Small Business Development Center. Now, this is one example. As we realize that in order for small business growth to happen, and therefore small business to move to mid-size and larger, to look at anything else that looks at economic development, there had to be a single point, the lead. Chamber of Commerce is not a city-based agency. And the role it had taken, however that came about, they should not have been the lead. Well, but they had history. They had institutional knowledge of the city. They knew about the PRC. They served on it. They were a part of the UEZ. And so bringing together that collective was one of the best accomplishments we did. Not that we created something new that hadn't been created before. It was the formation of how they would operate. Then when the economic development director came on board, he had access to a city-based service, which was the chamber, which was operating with its 3,000 plus small businesses. Small Business Development Center, which was doing research, but had not plugged it into economic development holistically in the city. UEZ was now looking at being phased out, but had taken on a different approach to working and supporting the business, and the PRC left being that business that just does small microloans and larger loans to being that catalyst that did the marketing programs and things that we see. That small example represents what happens when you find that we were not all in the same accord. All of them looking at economic development in some form or fashion, but they had not been brought together. That took a while. We're still looking for all the fruit that we think that could bear, but it took the city stepping back, and by the way, the other parts of the city that have been integrated in that was the parking authority for some of its issues, the MUA. We had to keep doing that to see how do we make sure that these units, separate and apart, could come together for the city's best interest. And I'm happy to say the India trip, all of the Chinese delegations with the exception of one or two, all of them were invited to participate in those discussions and to hope that it would help fortify any position that would incur or ensue after this, including the research and things of that.
Thank you, sir.
Mr.
chime in.
Rodriguez, will you be responding to this question?
I'm not.
I'll chime in.
Mr. Torres?
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Donna, about, I'm going to say close to 30 years ago, I had my first experience at building capacity through community organization. And it started when I took my first job for the Housing Authority, in which I was a public housing manager. And since then, I went on to get certified as a PHM, which is the topic of the discussion of with Dave Gilmore, that he also has his certification as a public housing manager from the National Association of Housing and Redevelopment Officials. So the issue was building capacity within the community, but particularly as it relates to the public housing community through his resident management corporation, and trying to get the residents, weeding them out, that by actually becoming stakeholders and owners, by empowering them, then they could actually determine their destitute and determination of how they want to live in their housing environment. And I'm very proud to say that it was very successful, and it went on to a national demonstration project, which is affectionately known as the Brook Slope Conversion Property. Okay, and so we allowed that through this resident management corporation, that for $4,000 that they paid into through a credit union, they were able to then buy those homes, and most of those homes are owned, and then the resident managed corporation kept some for those individuals that did not want to or couldn't meet the requirement to buy. They could buy at a later date, and that was formed. And so through the years, where I became a purchasing agent and then looked at to cooperative purchasing agreement, working in capacity building with whether different towns, different governmental entities, in order to, again, empower and work into collaboration. And then that went, it took it a step further when I was mayor, and we worked together to create that blue ribbon panel that you mentioned. You could actually see that the community, the blue ribbon panel was to establish capacity and community building. And if there is anything I was proud of, was the blue ribbon panel, for the exception of one thing that is still on the burner to get accomplished. And that was that the community indicated that they wanted to see some type of civilian review board. And the discussion was entertained, and we need to do some more dialogue. So that, coupled by the town hall meetings that I had in every ward, monthly, every year that I was in office, asking the public to be my eyes and ears, and ultimately I would have been their mouthpiece, is what I truly believe will make us build capacity, and at the same time resolve, bring some resolution to the social problems that exist in our city.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ivy. That concludes Ms. Ivy's second round of question and answers. As we move to our next candidate, Mr. Rigo Rodriguez, he will present a second question to his opponents, and his opponents will have 3 minutes once again to respond to the questions. I just would like to remind all our viewers that if you would like to do early voting, please call or go to 401 Grant Street, Patterson, first floor at County Clerk's office. And there'll be someone there to assist you and guide you through the process. Mr. Rodriguez, you may begin.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. I'm used to saying through the chair. It gets
I'm
me
not the
caught
chair.
up. Mayor Jones, it seems like every time we ask you a question, you do act like either you don't understand it, or I don't know, maybe it's an annoying question, but I like asking those questions. And one of them is that I'm not clear on how did it happen that we gave you the tools to address the issue of the potholes. And you know very well that the way our potholes are in our streets is a public safety. And the citizens of Patterson are very alarmed on what's going on. You do have money in the budget, and you do have the trucks and the tar and whatever it takes to fill up these potholes. Why is it that we have not provide our constituent with a better traveling road?
The easier answer would be God and bad weather and other things. That would be the easier answer. Councilman, you acknowledge, and I thank you for it. You said you provided us with the tools. I think that is highly misleading. What the council did do was, based on the request of the director, as each director would submit, request certain equipment to be able to address certain jobs. With those jobs, you need staff. As indicated earlier, 474 people were laid off, 125 happen to be police officers, the remainder, some out of public health and human services, an awful lot of public works. We have demonstrated in front of the council, and we can always go to the videotape, where several of the vehicles that have been in the city's arsenal, their usefulness was long gone. 39 years was one vehicle, 29 was another, so forth and so on. When we submitted information to you to be able to buy equipment, you weren't always willing to accept it. You would even table some things. You would deny things, particularly in CD, until you got the answer. Maybe not you. I won't say you did, but the council did, the body did. So now, unless you're telling me that you don't understand that in order for this city, under an MOU with this DCA, that has to get approvals for a paperclip, well, I'm being facetious about paperclip, but any major purchase or any purchase such as a new vehicle or a contract, if you're saying that you asked a question because you don't know and understand why you've been telling the council all this time that the only way to accomplish a $250,000 expenditure such as pothole repair is to wait, go through the process, go through the council, and have you approve it, if you're saying that you're trying to get me to say that that's what we had to do, then I'll tell you that's what we had to do. But as I said in the beginning, the only way I can answer your question is God and bad weather. Thank you.
Former Mayor Torres, I've seen you talking about all these good things that you brought into our city, And I'm troubled because some of those things were project that happens in prior administration, and it just happened to be developed in your administration. For instance, Home Depot was a big thing there, whereas Councilman Rooney was a big problem in that project. And Councilman McCoy and myself in the back here had to make a decision and bring it to the council on that $250,000 that we had to fade away on that. And so on, then Lowe's came, and so did Pet Boy on that corridor there. That's part of some other, it takes a while for a project to develop. But my issue is that, you know, people perceive as that one being one of the biggest things in whatnot. But what they don't know is that Center City, the Vista project, which is right here on Toto Ave and the vicinity, which I myself was very careful and telling your administration not to sell everything to one person. The failure of the police precinct that you put everywhere, and the failure of the lack of structuring a good contract when it comes to the evaluation have brought this city to the chaos we're in today. What would you do different when it comes to all these properties that we have?
First and foremost, Councilman, I don't know where you've been over the last 12 years, but I know for a fact that everybody else could see the value of close to $1 billion in redevelopment that occurred during my administration. And not only that, there was a direct correlation. If you Oprah the financial statements or you look carefully at the budgets, carefully, as you're statutorily required to do, you will see that in the 7 out of 8 years, the increase in rateables lend an average of $4.2 million in operational surplus. So regarding the selling everything with MD SAS, that was it was a way of infusing millions of dollars. The Vista, to me, would have worked if it would have been done at a different timing. It actually was built at the collapse of the housing market. Unfortunately, though, the developer, I recall, the developer came and he asked for a 5-year tax abatement. Interesting enough, just recently, one building got off for 30 years of a tax abatement, and this council approved another one, re-upped it for another 30 years of tax abatement. But that developer asked for a 5-year tax abatement, and this governing body did not see fit to provide them the relief that it's needed at the peak of the economic tsunami, and therefore that's what led to the collapse of the Vista Center. Everything else, so in short, we have 900 abandoned buildings. I'm going to exercise the same statute that you opted to register, and I'm going to take them to eminent domain. My neighborhood stabilization project will allow us to generate $27 million. I will create a trust. I will then lend it to the developers. We're going to rebuild those homes. Some of them knock them down and build new homes, infill housing, and then sell it with a deed restriction. And that way we provide safe, stabilized neighborhood. And then once it's resold and pay that money back to the city, we will have an infusion of $135 million, which that's enough capital. That's almost 7 years or 10 years of, 6 years of what we get in the stress city aid. And then that could show the plan to the state, and maybe we could wean ourselves out of our distressed city aid in that fashion, dependent on the state city aid with the $135 million infusion.
Mr. Gao, You were here when the deal for the Center City was struck. And Center City has brought a lot of airtime when it comes to newspaper, but at the same time, it's just a white elephant sitting right there, where the second floor that's literally closed. Do you know how much we lose on revenue on that Center City deal as a city?
Well, I don't know that we're losing anything. Maybe some job opportunities and things like that. As far as the real estate value is, you know, it's unfortunate. It was a great investment by those investors. Patterson just has a different market. I spoke to them at one point, and they said to me if they knew then what they know now, they would have never invested in Patterson. So it's very disturbing to know that a lot of the top floor of the building is vacant. They just can't get the right attraction there with the right market. But I think for the most part, they're still paying their bill. I mean, that's all I can say at this time.
Thank you. Mr. Sayer. Mr. Sayer, as we all know, downtown is dead. The school board took off out of downtown. The yellow lines on the main, and Center City that is not a vibrant environment. What will you do to bring a job into the corridor of our city?
Thank you, Councilman Rodriguez. I teach at William Patterson University and Passaic County Community College. And one thing as mayor that I would advocate for is that Passaic County Community College students can earn a 4-year degree from William Patterson University by staying at Passaic County Community College. It's a program that's worked elsewhere. Now, how would that help the downtown as far as vibrancy is concerned? Well, then there would be the need for dormitories. And ultimately, we'd like to attract young professionals and keep them in the city. So if you're at Passaic County Community College and you're earning a 4-year degree at William Patterson University, you may be likely to stay here if there are economic opportunities in the form of employment. So one thing I do is work with both college presidents on making sure that if you're at Passaic County Community College, you can earn a 4-year degree by not even leaving Patterson to go to Wayne at William Patterson University, and that may contribute to some vibrance that could occur in the downtown section. But in addition, obviously the Great Falls National Park is a critical component as well. We need to accentuate the assets in the ethnic diversity that we have. So if we can get that right, we can get it going. Thank you.
Madam Clerk, that will conclude my line of questions.
Thank you, Mr. Rodriguez. Our next candidate to present a second question to his opponents will be Mr. Andre Sayer. Mr. Sayer will have an opportunity to present his question, and his opponents, once again, will have 3 minutes to respond. I would just like to remind our viewers that you are viewing the mayoral candidates forum, and you will be eligible to vote for one of the 8 candidates that you are seeing this evening on May 13th. Mr. Sayer, you may begin.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Ms. Feliciano, earlier you asked former Mayor Torres a question that really piqued my curiosity. You had asked about Dominican representation in his administration, and he had talked about appointing deputy mayors. Now, we all know deputy mayors don't really have decision-making powers, and they're not salaried as well. I think perhaps what you were going towards was why he has never appointed a Dominican as a department head. So, in your estimation, why hasn't former Mayor Torres appointed a Dominican American to a department head position?
I think that the relationship that Mayor Torres, or the lack of relationship that Mayor Torres had with the Dominican community in the areas that I mentioned, the attack on the small business owners, his comments constantly, lately, on Dominican newspaper indicating there are no Dominicans qualified for positions, his frontal attack to the 2 Dominican elected officials and city council as soon as they came on. And all of that behavior, I think, responds to the fact that Mr. Torres belongs to a community, a Latino community that settled in Patterson first, long time ago, and that saw perhaps the upcoming and growth of the Dominican community in Patterson as a threat, a political threat. Pretty much the way the political rivalries or competitions take place among different groups in the city. So I believe that this is my sociological analysis, of course, so the reasons of what you asked. Mr. Torres saw the Dominican community as a threat or as competition politically, economically, and in every other way. And instead of doing politically wise things or taking politically wise steps, which would have been either collaborate with or empower, a new and upcoming group, he chose to attack it and try to minimize it or eliminate it. And yes, during his 2 terms, he never appointed any Dominican American to any position of significance. It's actually an insult to say that he named someone deputy mayor. We all know that's an honorary position. And to add salt to injury, he named that deputy mayor close to his second campaign. Like 2 months before the campaign, he did a couple of things like that, I'm sure, to try to ingratiate himself with the Dominican community. So my sociological analysis was that he reacted to what he saw as a political threat or a competition.
Thank you. Former Mayor Torres, in my opening remarks, I talked about how I took decisive action against 2 establishments where murders had taken place. Now, that incident that occurred at Charlie's Angels across the street, Robert Street, I should say, happened under your watch. The incident that occurred at Alex's Playground after hours, man was murdered inside, happened under your watch. I'm a legislator. I'm not an executive. I'm trying to become the mayor so I can take action that you didn't. What I'm asking you is, why did it take me to do what you were supposed to do? Why did you fail to act when 2 men were murdered under your watch?
Any loss of life is a tragedy. However, the duties and responsibility of the chief executive officer does not fall within law enforcement. That's the reason why he has a police chief. That's the reason why you have a public safety officer. I mentioned earlier that I was able to work in collaboration and do a blue ribbon panel. It was that same recommendation from the blue ribbon panel that said that you had to have a separation between statutorily, a mayor cannot have direct involvement with the operation, the day-to-day operation of the police department. Similarly, the mayor cannot have a direct involvement with the courts. So the issue is every life is a tragedy. What I did do was do some preventative stuff. The first gun buyback program in the city of Patterson was held under my administration. We opened up the precincts. Yes, we had some resistance, and they burned them and they vandalized them because it was working. We had the police precincts right there where the crime was generated at, and we reduced crime, and then we removed them. We also entered into a shared service agreement whereby we brought the mounted police with the sheriff department in our city parks. Those were things that would work, and that's the reason why, in addition to adding the 100 boots to the ground and promoting people of diversity that reflect the city of Patterson, and I'm so proud that we were able to do that. And lastly, we were able to, in order to fight crime, put cameras on the streets and be able to put computers and computerize and upgrade our dispatching center that now since is obsolete, and we need some work with it to address the multitude of calls and urge and mandate from the chief and the police director that we had appropriate response time. We did that, and lastly, I was able to get a grant to hire 25 police officers to put them into the schools to deal with the juvenile delinquency and address the bullying issue that we know is paramount within our public school systems. So I am proud of my record, I'm proud of my accomplishments. I'm not a police officer, I'm a chief executive officer, and I will continue to do that, and the proof is in the pudding with the reduction of crime, the lowest that it was since 1965.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. That concludes my line of questioning for this round.
Thank you, Mr. Saya. Our next candidate to ask his second round of questions and answers during this period would be Mr. Jose Joey Torres. Once again, Mr. Torres will be asking his opponents a second question, and his opponents will have 3 minutes to respond to the questions that he is posing to them. Mr. Torres, you may begin.
Maria Feliciano, I was privileged to hearing a recording that was done on a local Dominican radio station, whereby you was questioned from a call-in, and the question was about a meeting, a secretive meeting that was done by yourself and Congressman Pascarell, and that when they asked you, you said, yes, we met, but I could not reveal why we had that secret meeting. I have proof that the secret meeting was, just as you indicated with the, with my unconceived or false allocations that I'm not favored by the Dominican community. But the purpose was that as a former county employee, within the judiciary system, and that meeting, that in order to support Councilman Saya's candidacy, that meeting was that you were to stay, even at the urgence of the Dominican community to drop out, that you were to stay in the race in order to divide the Dominican community so that Councilman Saya could gain a notoriety and actually win this race.
You have some balls to be saying that. That is not true. It's a lie. I don't know where you're coming from. It's a lie. I mean, the content of the meeting that you have proved, you're lying, and you know that you're lying. I did meet. Let me hear it. Let me hear it.
Mr. Torres.
No, let me hear it. You are lying. You are so lying. I did meet with a congressman. You have no recording of anything because there's no such thing. That was not the content of the meeting. As a matter of fact, if we're talking about someone who's running to prevent somebody else from winning, you are running as mayor to prevent the Dominican from being elected in this city. You know that. You have no other reason to be running. Show the proof. You are so lying. And why would you do that? Why would you lie? What is your agenda saying that? You have no recording of such conversation because it's not true. It did not happen. And you're lying.
Thank you for that response, and that ladylike response.
Mr. Torres, there's no rebuttal.
Okay. The next question goes to Councilman Saya. Wait a minute. My apologies. Cool. Okay. Councilman Saya, in the Herald News this morning, you were quoted as saying, I anticipated inheriting a budget shortfall from the Jones administration, unquote. City records show that you approved a $100,000 no-bid contract to a firm owned by Bill Pascarell, political field operative, a political field director, which will create a new tax in Patterson for property owners in the 1st and in the 6th ward of the city. Are you premeditating and blaming the Jones administration for an increase which you are approving and implementing as councilman?
Mayor, I don't want to call you a liar like Ms. Feliciano did, but obviously you have a hard time telling the truth. Let me point out one thing.
It's proof.
If there's one person who's talented in turning a surplus that he inherited into a deficit, it's you. You made history in Patterson. When Mayor Barnes left office, he left you with a hefty surplus. And what did you do? You left Mayor Jones with a hefty deficit. And on your way out the door, what did you do? You took $74,000, which only added to the deficit. So if there's anyone here that shouldn't be talking about deficits, it's you, because that's all you've done. You left the Patterson taxpayer in a deficit.
And I have no more further questions.
Thank you, Mr. Torres. That concludes our second round of questions and answers by our candidates.